Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, issues, and trends from an admittedly conservative perspective. This evening I'm joined by Harold Hervey. He's the chairman of the Conservative Party USA, and we're going to be discussing whether or not, in the wake of the 2012 election, will there be a third party that emerges to maybe absorb some of the conservatives who may be defecting from either the Republican or the Democrat or independent sides. Harold, thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it.
So, you're the chairman of the Conservative Party USA. Tell us a little bit about the party for people who've never heard of it.
Sure. The Conservative Party was founded in 2009 by Sam Gallo. Our headquarters are actually in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We're a national party, a national PAC, and we're organized along states. We have a national party, but we're organized per states. For California, for example, is a Conservative Party, California, Louisiana, Pennsylvania. We have about 10 active states in various development throughout the nation. And as a result of this election, we're experiencing unprecedented growth. Within the past month, we're going to be adding, between now and the middle of January, 5 new states to bring to the family of the Conservative Party. We were essentially founded on the basic principle that the two major parties have failed America. And that is evidenced by anyone who understands what's going on in America, by our growing national deficits, as far as the eye could see, our $16 trillion national debt, our decay in moral society. There's a whole range of social and fiscal issues that are plaguing this country that are growing, not abating. And the two major parties have contributed to that. And sadly, we believe that the Republican Party shoulders the major burden of that responsibility, because every time they run for office, they always tell us they're fiscally and socially conservative, but when they get into Washington, as our previous colleague mentioned, that cesspool they complained about when they were running turns into a jacuzzi for them, and they lose sight of what's going on. You know, that $16 trillion national debt, those ongoing trillion-dollar deficits, didn't happen just because of Democrats. The Republicans were complicitous and duplicitous. And as a result, true conservatives began to realize over the last 10 years that the Republican Party has failed to live up to their conservative values and principles. We got tired of fighting for the heart and soul of our party and decided to leave to form a party that's built from the ground up for conservatives by conservatives.
Okay, and so when we hear things like this, and you're saying that the cesspool, as you're calling it in Washington, and people have also called it Potomac fever, you drink the water and something happens to you. Talk to me about your feelings on, there was a purge recently,
yes.
And it's beginning. I mean, the Democrats did it on the last election cycle. They got rid of the blue dogs and ran people against them, et cetera. In this last election cycle, Allen West, for example, lost, and others like Michelle Bachmann or other people known to be conservative or Tea Party oriented tended to be pushed aside. Do you think that that helps the Republican Party, hurts the Republican Party, and what's the outcome for the Conservative Party? The
Republican Party has problems along these lines. This is the main reason why the Conservative Party was founded. We were tired of fighting for the rhinos, with the rhinos, for the heart and soul of the party. So this purge, this latest purge by Boehner, 3 conservative Republicans to get rid of them from the Finance and Budget Committees, is indicative of the problem that they're having. Jim DeMint left, not because of a $1 million salary, even though that was a wonderful thing to do.
It's a nice enticement.
Yes, you know, it's a nice job if you can get it. But he left because he didn't believe that he could be effective within the Republican Party in Congress. And he was one of the most stalwart conservatives out there. So the Republican Party is starting to fray around the edges and implode from within. As I predicted, about 2 months ago, I gave a presentation at the Tea Party in Fresno. And I was asked, how will the election affect the Republican Party? And I said very clearly, if Romney wins, it's good for America. If Romney loses, it's good for the Conservative Party, because the Republican Party will fracture along moderate and conservative lines. And that's happening, but it's happening a lot faster than I really anticipated.
Yeah.
And the Boehner incident, firing those three Republican conservatives, the Mint leaving, just points to how badly things are going for the Republican Party. In addition, they are already caving in about taxes, and they are already ready to compromise about illegal immigration. And they're doing it because of their trauma they're experiencing by the election. Mm-hmm. And so many of the values and principles that they've espoused for the past 10 years, they're now abandoning because of votes. Not because it's good for America, but because of votes. And they don't realize that they're not going to gain many votes by abandoning their principles. Mm-hmm. They will lose moderate votes. They will lose conservative votes.
Well, I was at the Tea Party you mentioned, and there were about 300 people in that room. And it was interesting that some people actually did stand up and say, you know, if this doesn't go well, or if Romney gets elected and doesn't stand up for conservative, smaller government values, then I'm done. And several of them said that, and many of them clapped when that kind of a statement was made. And it is kind of a scary time. Now, the Republican Party, especially in the House, they're, like you said, they're beginning to cave. And it's, I think, partially media pressure and the Beltway think of, yes, we've got to, you're saying they're caving on immigration, partially because they're trying to attract the Hispanic or Latino vote. They're caving on taxes because of this, and even Boehner saying that, yeah, who are we going to tax? We're going to tax the rich, because they think that that's the media response. Although the House maintained their seats and ran on a platform of doing the opposite of what Boehner's discussing.
The Tea Party event that I participated in was really eye-opening. When I mentioned the fact that during the whole Republican convention, not one person, not one speaker acknowledged the value of the Tea Party. The Tea Party people at that rally stood up and clapped. They understood what was happening. And many of the people who were Tea Party favorites who won the 2012 election were freshmen. They actually did vote to raise the debt ceiling. And why did that happen? That happened because they got no support. They got no mentoring. They received nothing but attacks from the media and Democrats, and they weren't really supported by the Republican elite. The Tea Party is the most important thing that has happened to the Republican Party in America for a long time. So the idea that the Republican Party would abandon them or not openly support them is very indicative of what's wrong with the Republican Party. And sadly, you know, and I'm an ex-Republican. I worked for 7 years in the Santa Clara Republican Party. I was on the executive committee, and I helped on a number of campaigns to help Republicans get elected. But gradually, this fissure, I began to realize that Republicans are not conservative, and conservatives are beginning to realize that too. And for the Republicans, really sad thing for this, as much as I've enjoyed them, the Tea Party people will leave them also. And as I mentioned, the Conservative Party is experiencing unprecedented growth because of the actions of or lack of action of the Republican Party. They've lost their core values. And if you don't have a core value that you're not afraid to espouse, that you're not afraid to articulate, that you're always worried about offending someone, that you're worried about what the media will say about you, well, when that happens, if you've lost the game, if you've lost your core values, and you've lost the strength to be able to withstand the slings and arrows that are going to come your way. That's not going to happen with the Conservative Party.
Mm-hmm. And so as you're seeing the growth that's occurring, are you seeing more people come to the Conservative Party from the Republican side or from the Democrat side? Where
Sure.
are you seeing growth in both places and others?
No, predominantly the Conservative Party is fairly far removed from the Democrat Party in most aspects. We'll get a few blue dog Democrats here and there, but the vast majority, 90% of the people that are joining the Conservative Party are coming from Republicans, and the balance, 14% or so are coming from the Tea Party. The Tea Party gradually is becoming more and more looking in our direction because, even though they're unified by fiscal issues, Many of them understand the necessity of understanding the value of supporting social issues. And one of the things that the Conservative Party is, we are constitutionally conservative, we are fiscally and monetarily conservative, and we are socially conservative in equal quarters, in equal parts. We're not afraid to talk about and espouse and articulate the social values. You can't run America just by balancing the books. This country was founded on the principles and values that our founders wrote about in the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. And being afraid of talking about social issues is a death knell. And the analogy I use is everyday family life. A man provides for his family. He works hard. He puts a roof over his head for his children. He gives them education. He gives them good medical care. He gives them cars, and he sends his wife on vacation, and they have a wonderful home in a nice neighborhood. Well, all those things are important. But now, does that man have the right to go out and have an affair with the babysitter? No. Just because he puts a roof over his head does not mean, or the family provides for his family, does not mean now that he has the right to go out and sell drugs or get drunk. Well, it's the same thing with America. We must be able to manage both elements of our society, social and fiscal. We cannot abandon the social and try to balance the books, because what happens then is chaos.
But additionally, a lot of the social issues are tied to direct financial issues for the maintenance of the country. For example, when we are penalizing married couples who are successful, if, for example, I'm listening to the tax cliff discussions, and if someone makes under $200,000 as an individual, they're considered wealthy. But if they get married, now it's only $250,000
Yes.
between the two of them. So it's actually beneficial for them to live unmarried. They can go up to $400,000 and not be considered wealthy, as opposed to with the other. And if you look at welfare or social service support, somebody making $29,000 as a single parent, which is just harder to raise a properly adjusted child. Not that it can't be done, it's just much harder. They get $60,000 in spending power versus somebody who's making $70,000 as a couple has about $25,000 in spending power. It's backwards.
Sure. Can you see my eyes glaze over? Well, if my eyes glaze over in this very poignant and germane set of facts you just pointed out, gives you an indication of how dysfunctional Congress is and how complicated and inane and the tax code has been written. And Congress, when they get to Congress and they get to Washington, D.C., they become slaves of all these various interest groups, and everybody is an interest groups, from poor people to wealthy people to unions, et cetera, and married people versus single people. So we need people there who have the best interests of the nation at heart, not the best interests of themselves. Right now, Republicans and Democrats are failing America because they're worried about getting reelected instead of worrying about managing the affairs of this country. And that's the difference between the two major parties and the Conservative Party. Many people give us, first look at us with a jaundiced eye. They say, well, you know, you're never going to be a majority party. You're never going to unseat the Democrats and the Republicans. And I say, well, you're right. We're not going to. But that's not our objective. The objective of the Conservative Party is to be a cohesive minority party that, with a seat at the table, to act as a check and balance against the duplicity of the major two parties. And because we're not trying to be a majority party, we don't have to be all things to all people like the Republican Party is trying to do now. And because we're not trying to be all things to all people, we're not going to have to compromise our values. And that's the key. A solid, cohesive party that isn't going to compromise our values, that acts as a check and balance against the duplicity of the two major parties. And of course, we know what the two major parties have gone. People say, well, what have they done? What would be worse? The two major parties continuing the way they're doing it now? Or should we do the same thing? Should we go to $20 trillion in debt? Should we be overrun with illegal immigrants? Should we be paying for $16 trillion, $20 trillion, annual $2 trillion deficits? Should we now abandon our free capitalist system? You know, the key here is the fiscal cliff that you talked about, essentially. The fiscal cliff is important because people fail to realize that the House has sole authority to write spending and tax bills, not the Senate, not the president. And when Republicans in the House start caving and start complaining and start worrying and start masticating and starting backstepping about being able to stand up to Obama, people really need to realize what they're doing. They're caving to political pressure. The House is controlled by Republicans, and the House sets tax and spending bills. So they have a lot more control than people realize, and they should live up to their duties and responsibilities.
Well, there's that, but additionally, they're also, in many cases, too willing to cede their power to unelected boards and such, but also one of the recent negotiation points Obama put forth is, okay, I want an unlimited debt ceiling.
Yes.
Which would totally relinquish their power of the purse.
Yes.
Because
again, they're afraid. And they're afraid because they're worried about what's the next editorial going to be in the New York Times. They're afraid of being called bad names by the people at MSNBC. They're worried about what's happening with the San Jose Mercury News. They're worried about the wrong things. And they're worried about getting reelected. And so when we get citizen legislatures, as our founders intended, who do things for the right reason, instead of worrying about being reelected, and not worry about what the media says or editorials. And then once you understand what you're there for, then you'll be in much better position to handle the slings and arrows of righteous retribution that various constituents come at you. I give the Michigan Congress, the Michigan legislature, all the credit in the world for passing a right-to-work legislation today. They understood what was right to do for the state and the nation, and they did it. It's too bad we don't have much more of that courage in Washington, D.C.
Or even California.
California, sadly, is America's next failed state. And it looks like, sadly, that it's $176 billion in debt. There's no end in sight. Californians, unbeknownst to themselves, have just voted themselves another tax increase, as if that's going to solve the education problem, because Democrats and the House and governor will come back in 2 more years for another tax increase. And it will be the first failed state because eventually no one's going to loan California any money. The unions, the state employees unions, have the state at a huge disadvantage, and they're holding them hostage. There were some referendums in California and San Diego and San Jose and during the 2010 election to help reverse that. But as a whole, the California's budget, 80% of it is now being used to pay for salaries and pensions, and there's no end in sight. And it's one government. California is an example of what happens when you have an unopposed party like the Democrats running the show, being tied in and beholden to the unions. And I don't see any way out. As a matter of fact, California, for the first time, has lost population. They're going to Texas and to Florida, believe it or not. And all it's going to do is have more tax increases, and the earners are going to leave.
Well, and it's unfortunate because already, with only 12% of the country's population, still a third of the welfare cases happen in California. There's no way to sustain it over the long term.
Only poor people like you and I will be left.
And poorer by the day, unfortunately.
Yes.
So what is the Conservative Party doing that's different to recruit candidates? Because it sounds like you're looking for a different mindset. You're not looking at somebody who's going to be permanent. What are you doing to support and grow candidates? And are you recognized as an official party in any of the 50 states so far?
No, we're almost a party in New Jersey. But our objective is a very good question. Our objective is to become a party. A viable third party. We know it's not going to happen next year. We know it's not going to happen in 2 years. But we have a long-term plan to build a party from the ground up. And we have this thing called Project Mayberry. And as the name implies, we're not going to repeat the mistakes of the previous third parties, like the American Independent Party, the Green Party, Libertarian Party, Constitution Party. They've been around for a long, long time and haven't done anything. And the reason why they haven't done anything is because they haven't tended to basic blocking and tackling. That is, building a conservative base from the ground up. And Project Mayberry is a concept we've developed that will go out and seek out and close with and identify conservative candidates for down-ticket offices, for small-town mayors, school boards, water boards, dog catchers, all those things that are, all those positions that are vital and important, and governors and judges, that we can create a conservative base from the ground up, so that in 3 and 4 years we can run somebody for the state house. In 6 years, we can run somebody for the U.S. House. In 8 years, the Senate, and in 20 years, maybe somebody for president. But step by step, the Conservative Party is building its base from the ground up, one brick at a time, as opposed to a house of cards. Project Mayberry is an example of that, and I urge people to come to our website and conservativepartyusa.org, look at Project Mayberry. And we want to ensure that we grow that from the ground up as opposed to the top down. Now, in the meantime, until we become on the ballot in California, until we become on the ballot in other states, we have and we will continue to endorse conservative Republicans for office. We have identified about 20 conservative Republicans in California that we endorsed for the November 12 election. We endorse people in Oregon, Pennsylvania, Florida. Out of all the candidates we endorsed, about 60 nationwide, 5 of them won. And they were Republicans. We endorsed Larry Naratelli, for example, in 2010 for governor. We did not endorse Meg Whitman for obvious reasons. So we will endorse support conservatives candidates. We're not going to split the conservative vote until such time as we do get on the ballot. And then, of course, all bets are off. Because, you know, the fact is, as a long-lived life Republican, I've come to realize that the Republican Party does not have a constitutional right to my vote or my money or my time and effort, because they violated their conservative principles. So they are no longer duty-bound. We're no longer duty-bound to support them. They haven't supported our values, so why should we support them?
But on a personal level and on a party level, you're looking at supporting directly candidates who can use your assistance and the muscle with which you're able to help.
Well, we officially endorsed Rick Santorum for president.
Right.
And we openly encourage people to vote for Mitt Romney against Obama. That's a no-brainer. And we endorse various Republicans, and we will continue to do that. Now, in California, it's a little bit more difficult. It only requires 105,000 signatures to be on the ballot. We're a little bit short of that. But after this show, I'm sure that we're going to have enough money to be able to go out and get those 105,000 signatures. So by next year, we'll be on the ballot. Just kidding. It's very difficult.
And so just in closing, one more time, the website is?
www.theconservativepartyusa.org.
The Conservative Party USA?
www.conservativepartyusa.org.
Okay.
No,
great.
the.
Okay, good. So on that note, thank you very much, Harold, for joining us this evening. We'll be right back after a quick word from our underwriter, the Conservative Forum.
Constitutional law attorney. And they say, oh really, what kind of constitutional law attorney? I say, well, I'm the true kind. The kind that believe that the Constitution is what the Constitution says and what it was intended to say. Anything beyond that is tyranny and should not be allowed.
So it's come to this, my friends. You ready the second American Revolution against a ruling class that simply lectures but does not listen or defend the American people? It is government versus the people. Am I right? Look at the Electoral College example, right? A leftist popular challenge to states' rights. You think the founders weren't brilliant people? Did they not know what they were doing by carefully calibrating to get the small states and the big states to come together? Why does Wyoming get 2 senators in California? Actually, I'd rather have Wyoming's 2 senators.
Welcome back to the right side. And that was a word from our underwriter, the Conservative Forum. The Conservative Forum not only underwrites this show, but they're known best for their speaker series that happens typically the first Tuesday of each month at the IFES Portuguese Hall at 432 Stirling Road here in Mountain View. Speakers that are coming up in January, Yaron Brook is speaking actually on the 8th as opposed to the first Tuesday of the month because that's New Year's Day and it'll be hard to get people to show up. But in February also there will be Kevin Jackson from the Black Sphere. In March there will be a discussion about education and reforming it and getting the best possible result. In April, Dr. David Bobb will be there from the Hillsdale to speak, and May 7th, one that I'm looking forward to, Bill Whittle will be leading the discussion. If you'd like more information about the Conservative Forum and its various programs, including this one, you can go to theconservativeforum.com for more details. And in closing, there were a lot of questions that came out before this election. What would happen if Romney won? What would happen if Romney lost? A lot of conservatives were grumbling that they would hold their nose and vote for Romney if that was what was required because they wanted to stop Obama, but they were looking for a more conservative alternative. As we heard tonight from Harold, there are other options that are beginning to emerge and want to be taken seriously as an alternative to either choosing the D or the R in future tickets. There's still a lot of work left to be done for parties such as the Conservative Party, but there are more choices that are coming to the marketplace for people who would like a place to call home as opposed to just being declined a state or considering themselves independent. Look at all your options. Figure out what's best for you and for where you want to go, and get active. Do something. Just sitting alone on the side and complaining won't get the job done and won't get your voice represented in the public square. So on that note, I'd like to thank you once again for joining us this evening on The Right Side. Again, I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and I'll look forward to seeing you again either in person or on the show sometime soon. Thanks again and have a great night.